Morning guys, I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I thought what we'd do today is we'd just take a ride around this wildlife area, do a little hiking, do a little riding, and identify some of the trees at Eastern Woodlands with you. They're all pretty much in bloom now, so we can look at the leaves really well, we can look at the bark, we can talk about the useful properties of these trees. And I harp on trees a lot in my school because I think that trees are something that's greatly overlooked as far as self-reliance goes, because trees are 4 seasons. Everybody worries about medicinal and edible plants, but a lot of people don't think about the trees. And trees being 4 seasons can give you a lot of medicinal and edible value, but they're also useful for a lot of other things that plants sometimes don't give you, like construction materials. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. We're going to walk through 10, 12 different trees. Stay with me guys, we'll get started. Okay, so the first tree I want to talk about is the river birch, and this is a river birch right here. I'll show you an up close at the leaf. This is a wetland area tree. Let's back this camera out just a little bit and we'll kind of look up the tree. It's a fairly tall growing tree. Like any other birch, it has bark that peels off of it, and you can peel that bark into a bundle for tinder if needs be. And you should be able to light it up with just a ferrocerium rod or easily with open flame. Okay, so here's some river birch bark that I've collected, and I'm just going to process it a little bit to increase the surface area or expose fine fibers that I'll be able to hit with a ferrocerium rod. And then if I put this on the ground where I was going to start a fire, which wouldn't obviously be in this wet area, but for sake of demonstration this will work. And I can pile that up, and I should be able to ignite that with my knife and my ferrocerium rod. And it will burn very hot and very black, very similar to the way pine resin would burn. There we go. So you can see that makes a very good tinder material, would make a good bird nest. Also will take a spark fairly readily from a ferrocerium rod. Okay, this is a branch from the river birch, and you can see what the leaves look like on that branch. A little bit lance-shaped, serrated. And that is the black birch or river birch. A very, very good tree in Eastern Woodlands to understand and know. Grows in wetland areas. Okay, also growing in this wetland area, we have a willow, a black willow, right here. It's growing actually down into the water. And this tree does not thrive very well once it gets tall. The branches break off pretty easily in the wind. The trees shear off, and there's another part of the trunk over here that is actually dead now, dead standing. Willow is a very good soft wood that can be used for bow drill fire sets. It's also very good when stripped off of these smaller branches like the ones up there for basket making material. And it's also medicinally valuable as a pain reliever. So let me see if I can grab one of those leaves off of there so I can show you what it looks like. I'm also going to cut into some bark here and let you see what that looks like as well, how soft it is. Okay, this is the dead portion of our willow that's dead standing over here. And when we cut into that, you can see that that bark just cuts like butter when I go down it like that. This inner bark material here is what you're really looking for medicinal value. It also makes decent cordage, not the best by any means, but it will make decent cordage if you can get it split off just like that. You can split that down, get it separated, separate the outer bark from the inner bark, and get these fibers split out, and it will make decent cordage for you. Once this thing is dead, like I said, this one's dead standing. It doesn't look like it, but it is. There's no green branches on it. It's broken off the top. And this would be the medicinal stuff right here. This actually makes very, very good bow drill wood. And we'll see if we can find a piece of it dead here so I can show you easily it carves. And that's what I look at when I'm trying to make a bow drill fire set. I want to see how easy that wood will carve. If it slices through like butter, then I know it's going to be pretty good for a bow drill. Okay, here's a branch off of this willow that's out in the water that's alive, and you can see it has a very lance-shaped leaf, pretty much side by side right there. Little sprout coming out of the end of it. It's a pretty recognizable tree once you get used to looking for it, because it looks different than most of the other trees in that it has a very elongated leaf and lots of them, and they're very thin. And that's very indicative of different types of willow trees. But this one's always going to grow near water, especially the black willow will always grow near water. It's going to try to grow in areas where it can get some sun. It doesn't like shade. It is shaded in here, is probably why this tree's not doing real well. But all of the parts of this tree that are living are all reaching toward a clearing out here in the sun to the southeast. So, okay, the next tree we're going to look at is the quaking aspen. And this one's kind of mixed in with some other maple up here. I'll try to get a close-up of the leaves for you if I can. You can see that I can't reach any of them to grab one down for you, but they are shaped like a poplar, except they have a saw-toothed edge on them, and it's called a big tooth aspen. And you can see that it has a long straight trunk like many poplars. It's in the willow family, so that tells you several things just by knowing that much. First of all, it's a poplar, which means it's going to be a good tree for cordage. It's also going to be a good astringent tree for medication. Because it's a poplar, which is related to the cottonwood and things like that, it's going to be a softwood, which means it's going to be good for a bow drill. Okay, here is the leaves of our big tooth or sawtooth aspen, and you can see it's very, very similar to cottonwood. The trees look very similar. The difference with the cottonwood is it's got a very flat shape on the bottom, almost a little bit of an indentation right here on the bottom of it, and it's not quite as toothy as this. But they're in the same family, and they look very similar, and they can be used for the same things. I want to show you another tree that's growing right here. It's kind of funny, I'm sitting here looking around this one spot. I stopped here for this quaking aspen, and there's probably 5 or 6 trees that we can talk about, maybe even 7, within 30 or 40 feet of me. And we're only probably 25 yards from when we started, when we talked about the willow and the river birch. So all of this biodiversity is right here in this area at the Pathfinder School, and that's the greatest thing about the Eastern Woodlands, is the biodiversity of trees that you have and the usefulness of those trees. So the tree I want to talk to you about now is a sapling that's growing in here. I'm going to bend him over here so we can get a look at it close up. And this is a sassafras tree. And if you look at this, it's got 3 different leaves on it. It has one leaf that is just normal, looks like a normal leaf. It has a leaf that kind of looks like a mitten on it, and then it has one leaf that has 3 fingers on it like this. So it has all 3 of those. If you scrape the bark or you pull the root and you smell it, it's going to smell like root beer or sassafras. The best thing about that tree is really its medicinal value. It's a very good carminative for upset stomach or digestion problems. Making a decoction from the bark, and if you refer back to some of my medicinal videos, you can find out about decoctions. Making a decoction of that bark will settle an upset stomach. So that's a really good thing about sassafras, and it grows very prevalently in the Eastern Woodlands. There's lots of it out here. So I wanted to show you that real quick. The tree doesn't grow straight at all. It grows really, really crooked most of the time. It's got a dark black bark on it on a bigger tree, and when you scrape the bark you can smell it, but the leaves are a telltale sign. This tree is the Eastern White Pine, and it has 5 needles per cluster. So if we pull one of these clusters off and we count the needles, there'll be 5 needles on each cluster. And that tells us it's a white pine. Now, the white pine is the best for vitamin C value medicinally. If we were going to make pine needle tea with this, there's more vitamin C in an 8-ounce cup of pine needle tea than there is in 5 lemons. It was used by sailors for scurvy and things like that during the early times of American exploration into North America. The Indians taught them that. Some of the other things that are very good medicinally about this is it's very antiseptic. And it's also, because it has that sap or that pine resin in it, it's very sticky. So one trick that you can do with this is you can take a branch and just cut it off, just like this, and then cut it off again, and you can see the liquid coming out of that already. It's wet and damp right there. Now, if I were to have a cut or something on my hand, where I had cut open my hand maybe with my knife or something like that by accident, what I could do with this is I could make a bandage out of this just by splitting the bark, going around it one side, going around it on the other side, however long I needed that bandage to be, and then take and push and split that bark open, the outer bark, just like this, and then it will peel away from the tree, just like that. And that resinous material inside there, that pine resin from the white pine, is very sticky. Once it starts to dry a little bit, it gets sticky, and it's highly antiseptic. So you could actually take that, use that as a covering for a laceration, tape over top of that, and it'll get sticky once it starts to dry. It's not real sticky yet. You could cover that up with duct tape, cover that up with a bandana or a bandage of some kind, and that will give you an antiseptic property as well as some astringency to help close the wound and help it heal. And that is a very good thing to do with white pine if you want to use the bark of the white pine for a bandage. So you have very good medicinal properties within this white pine, both with the vitamin C and the antiseptic value of the inner bark itself, or the sap. Okay, so what we have here is an oak. Now there's several different species of oaks. Some of them are red, some of them are white. What's really important to understand for our purposes is that a red oak or a white oak. There's two ways that you can tell very easily. If it has rounded lobes on the leaves and not pointed, it's a white oak. You can cut into the bark and the inner bark will be white and not red. Couple things to remember about oak trees. The white oak is the one you want for medicine. The white oak inner bark is a very good medicinal decoction for any problems that you have basically above the neck, whether it's sinus congestion, headache, anything like that. Pretty much it's good for. This was the symbol for materia medica in medieval times. It was such a powerful tree or powerful medicine with the inner bark. The other thing to remember about this is all oaks are going to have acorns. The white oak acorns are going to be easier to leach the tannins out of because they have less tannins than the red oak. So if you're going to try to make some type of flour from acorns or whatever the case may be in a drop-dead emergency, you want white oak acorns. The red oak has pointed leaves, and we'll look at one of those in just a minute, and it has different values that make it better than the white oak. But the white oak is a very good building material. They make a lot of shake shingles and things like that, splits out of white oak as well. Okay guys, the next tree we're going to talk about is the locust tree. This is a honey locust. There's a couple of them growing right here, and there's several of them growing back here in the back that are much larger. Locust trees are good for a couple things. Number one, obviously, if you look at this thing, you got a series of really nice ready-made fish hooks on there, or fishing spears, or frog gigs, whatever you wanted to make with that. And they're very hard. It's pretty tough to break that thing, okay? They're pretty stiff. But again, you know, they're free for the taking. So you could make several gigs or hooks with these things. There's a perfect candidate for a hook right there, where you could just chop part of this off, tie your line to it, sharpen that up, and you got a ready-made hook right there. The other good thing about locust trees is they're very hard. They make great bows. Honey locust, black locust, both make good bows. So locust is a very, very good tree. It is also a very astringent bark. Had to blow a tick off me there, excuse me. It's also a very astringent inner bark, very similar to the black walnut tree. So it has a lot of tannin in it as well. So it's good medicinally, it's good for construction, good for fish hooks, fishing spears, frog gigs, all the things of that nature make the honey locust and black locust very good trees to understand and be able to identify. The leaves look like this. And you can see there's actually thorns underneath there. Very easy tree to identify. Okay, this is a small, I say small even though this is probably a 40-foot tree, tulip poplar. And the reason I brought you to this one is because number one, we can get a good close-up of what this bark looks like. It's very scaly looking, almost like skin of a lizard or something. And you can see these areas where it's dropping limbs. And that's very important to understand with tulip poplar, because that's one of the things that makes it such a great tree. And there's the leaf, a couple leaves right there. And you can see they kind of look like a tulip. Okay, and this is not really a poplar. It's actually a tulip tree. It's not in the poplar family at all. It's actually in the tulip tree family. But it's called yellow poplar, yellow wood, or tulip poplar. Very, very popular tree in colonial times. It was the only tree, or one of the only trees, that was actually exported live to Europe because of its preference for furniture making and things like that. It's a very soft wood. Daniel Boone had a canoe made out of this wood. The inner bark, if you go back to my video from last week, or my series, two-part series on making cordage, and then the series on making the quiver out of tulip poplar bark, you'll see how useful this tree can be for building materials. It's also a very useful fire starting tree. It's probably the best tree in the eastern woodlands all the way around, bar none in my opinion, for its versatility. It makes a great bow drill fire set. The leaves, or the limbs, as they fall off, as the tree starts to grow higher, the lower limbs fall off so that the tree can grow taller and reach out for photosynthesis. And as that happens, those branches that fall to the ground are generally the ones that you're going to make your bow drill set out of. Now, there's not too many right here on the ground because it's a very small tree. Like I said, these get to be about 150 feet tall. They'll be the tallest tree that you'll see on a landscape. If you look across the eastern woodland landscape and you see the tallest trees, those are generally going to be tulip poplars. It grows to about 150 feet. And I'll try to show you an example of a branch from a tulip poplar that's on the ground that would make a decent fire starting set, as well as a bird nest from the dead bark, in just a few minutes. Okay guys, this is the pitch pine. This is the king as far as the pine resin goes. You can see it's a really, really tall tree, real tall pine. Lots of branches horizontally coming off one vertical trunk. And you can see that spot right there where the tree's injured. That's going to be a big ball of pine sap. I don't know if I can reach it or not, but we'll give it a shot. We can shove our knife right into it, I'm sure. There we go. You can see that ooze and gob right there. Get that down here on our knife so you can see it better. That is nothing but straight pine resin. Let me get this camera adjusted and we'll look at that better. Okay guys, sorry about that. Here is the resin that we just took out of that pine. You can see how slimy that is. Very, very, very good natural accelerant. Very good for first aid. Perfect for making pine pitch, for mounting and hafting points and blades, for making a natural adhesive. We've got videos on that as well. I'm going to put a lighter to this here and I'm going to show you how well this stuff burns here in just a second. Okay, so I smeared that piece of pine pitch, or pine resin I mean, on this branch, and you can see if I put open flame to that, it's going to burn for a long time until it melts off of there. Great fire extender, a great adhesive material for things to patch things with. Also good for, you know, just putting on over a cut or something like that. Smear over a cut. If you've got a problem like that, you can smear it over top of that. It's antiseptic and it will help protect the wound. But you can see how that stuff burns once you put open flame to it. The black smoke coming off of that is the resins, the volatile resins in there. Okay. I know you can't see this very well, but I want to show you the leaves if I can first. This is a hornbeam tree, also called musclewood, also called ironwood. And it's kind of called that because it's kind of got that ripply effect like a muscle in your forearm when you tighten it up, has that kind of a ripple in it. The tree has that same thing. It feels like a muscle. Here's a smaller piece of it here. Okay, and it's a very dense, hard wood when it's live. There's probably a couple more of them in here really close. They're a tree that likes water. So they grow typically on creek sides and things like that in eastern woodlands or in wet, damp, moist areas. But it's a very, very good bow wood. It's called ironwood because it's so heavy it sinks. It will not float. And this is not a really good example of it, but it's pretty decent. I'd like to get you in some better light where you can see that muscle effect of the wood. So let's see if we can find a couple more of them right here close. See if we can get some better light to show you a better example. Okay, this is a smaller, younger one here, but you can see, if the camera's focused in right, you can see the ripples in there, almost like a muscle, and that's why they call it muscle wood. But this is a hornbeam tree. It's in the beech family, and it's probably the hardest, strongest wood in eastern woodlands next to hickory, and it makes a great bow. So it's very good for constructing things like bows, handles, things of that nature that you want to be really, really strong, or to use for a baton. Hornbeam would be a good choice wood for that. Two more quick examples of hop hornbeam for you here, guys. I'm going to show you it against another tree. This is an oak right here. This happens to be a red oak. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the hornbeam's growing right next to it, and you can see how that wood kind of has ripples in it. And that's why they call it muscle wood. Now this one beside it is a red oak, and we'll talk about that next. Okay, so this tree beside the hornbeam is a red oak. And the reason we know that is because the leaves are pointed. They have points on them instead of just being lobed. They actually have points on the leaves. You can see that where they come out, they're actually pointed. So when we scrape that inner bark, when we get to the inner bark of that tree, it's going to be red, not white. And the red oak is very good for building material. Not good medicinally, but great for building material. Red oak makes a great bow. Red oak is good and strong. It's a very, very hard wood, and it grows nice and straight. And that's one of the big advantages to oak versus some of the other woods is, even a sapling oak, red oak, will grow very long and straight. So it makes an easy, quick bow stave for a survival bow. And that's one of the greatest things about red oak. And again, we know it's a red oak because it has pointed leaves. Okay, guys, one of my other favorites. This is a hickory. And this is a shell bark hickory. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves. Other hickories have 7 to 9. This is called a shell bark hickory. You can see that they grow pretty long and straight. That's a nice 6-inch. There's 7 feet of that from the ground up to here. That's almost perfectly straight. That would make a perfect cut down, let dry out, split open. Probably 2 to 3 bow staves out of that piece of wood right there. And hickory would be one of the most preferred bow woods of the eastern woodlands. Very, very hard. Axe handles and things like that are all made out of hickory for a reason. Hickory is a very, very strong, tough wood. It's good to understand what it looks like so that if you have to harvest a survival bow of some kind, there's going to be a lot more hickory trees in the woods most of the time than there's going to be hornbeam trees. So again, you're looking at the leaves. You got 3 here, 2 here. So it's got 5 leaves on that stem. And that is shell bark hickory. We'll show you some bigger hickories in just a minute. Okay, guys, this is a shag bark hickory. A little bit bigger example. And if we look up at the leaves, and we zoom in on them, I hope you guys can see this. There are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 leaves per stem instead of 5. This is a shag bark hickory. A very good indicator tree of small mammals because ground squirrels, red squirrels, fox squirrels, gray squirrels, all of them love shag bark hickories. So you're going to find small game any place you find a good stand of shell bark or shag bark hickory. Now the other thing about hickories is, doesn't matter whether they're shag bark or shell bark, they're going to have hickory nuts certain times of the year, which is what attracts those small game mammals like the squirrels. But they're also edible by you. If you want to take the time to pick the meat out of the nut, which is a very small amount compared to the hassle it is to get into them, but with a sail needle, you can dig right in. So it's a food source as well. Alright guys, well, I'm Dave Canterbury at the Pathfinder School. I appreciate you joining me for this video today. If it goes over well, maybe I'll make another part in this series and we'll talk about some other trees. I just hit on some of my favorites today. I thank you for all your views, for your support, for everything you do for me, for my school, my family, my friends, sponsors, affiliates, and instructors. And I'll be back with another video as soon as I can, guys. Thanks.